Does anybody have questions, Pastor Kelly? We can't hear you.
I wanted to give to Vaughn an opportunity because I know he's been here, and I have plenty of questions, but I just want to make sure others had the opportunity as well.
Yeah, a couple of questions. I'm going to definitely touch on that whole Lemba in West Africa concept. But first, I wanted to talk about Dr. Parffit's work with the Cochin Jews, and also the Lemba, in the sense to where in both stories, there's small populations that turn into a larger population. I believe with the Cochin Jews, it was 7 that turned into a population of thousands, and then with the I believe in my distinct pleasure I had with interviewing Cohen Hamadisha, I believe, Cohen, you said that it was 12 people that turned into the population of the Lemba that we currently have. So being that those small numbers can turn into larger numbers, and also in my interview with Cohen Hamadisha, he said that he believes that there were Lemba on the slave ships that in the transatlantic slave trade that came to America. Is it viable? Do you think that we should also be doing DNA collects in America to see if there's a direct connection to the Lemba, being that over 500,000 people came from the coast of Mozambique and were taken to the Americas, and over 160,000 of such being taken to the Caribbean and North America?
Yeah, well, I think that it's. I think it would be interesting to trace it back, no doubt. And collections of DNA in different parts of Africa are now. We have collections of most areas, and I think that proper scientific genetic work could reveal a good deal. And this has been part of an enterprise that's been going on for a while. Some years ago, I worked a lot with Gates in Harvard, and you've seen his. I'm sure you've seen his TV shows. And the basic idea that we had at the time was that through genetics, you're opening a window into the past, which didn't exist before. And so in the case of African Americans, history pretty much stopped. With the Middle Passage, nobody had any idea of what happened really to their individual ancestors before that. And most people wouldn't know if they were Yoruba, if they were Zulu, if they were, whatever they were. Nobody would know this. But through genetics, it's possible to look at somebody's DNA, and then these tribal affiliations will show up in many cases. And going forward, this can only get more sophisticated. This can only get more accurate. Knowledge of our pasts through DNA will become more complete. And this is a very, very wonderful thing, and it's a very democratic thing. And I say democratic because, over history, over time, rather, it was only really the rich and the well-connected kings and queens and princes and aristocrats. These were the people who had history. The regular guys, the serfs and the working class people, they didn't have any history. And with genetics, we're all the same. Every man has got his history book inside him. It can be opened up. It can be studied. And if people are finding in their DNA traces of a kind of Lemba profile, well, that is saying something about some of their remote or not so remote ancestors. And that is fascinating, and it can make a huge difference, I think, to the way that people see themselves. And you mentioned the B'nai Israel, Tyvon, and that was, there's a lot of racial, prejudice here, because, one of the reasons that African Jews find it difficult to be accepted as Jews by other Jews is because they're black, no question. And if a white group came up with the same amount of proof, there would be, nobody would even question it for a second. So there's some kind of antithesis in some people's mind between the idea of being black and being Jewish. And so it was with the Bnei Israel in Western India, where you've got a black community, like black people from southern India. And, so in Mumbai, used to be called Bombay, there was a kind of Middle Eastern Jewish community that was quite powerful and wealthy, and they controlled the docks and a lot of the trade, and they had some great figures, among them who were successful in all sorts of different spheres. And then you had these black Jews. Well, there was no intermarriage between the two groups, and the black ones weren't allowed to celebrate with the white ones. They were not allowed in their synagogues and so on. So there was absolute prejudice. And that basically said, they're not Jews. They're not Jews. And so that was a very satisfying piece of research for me, was to be able to, to do the DNA, collect DNA all over Western India, and to be able to come up with the proof that way back, they had left the Middle East. In fact, they left the same place as the Lemba did. They probably came from the Yemen, and they went east. They went to India, and they created a kind of, Jewish community that changed over years because they were isolated from other Jews. But similarly with the with the Lemba, white Jews in South Africa didn't want to know. They were very, very, very skeptical. They still are in many cases, and the question is very largely to do with color. And I don't want to promote my own book extravagantly or anything like this, but in this book, there is so much information about the connections between Jews and blacks, and the way in which these connections were understood in the period that led to the transatlantic slave trade on the one hand, and to the Holocaust on the other. These are two of the great events of history, terrible events, but I think they're explained in this book. The background to the hatred of Jews and the background to the hatred of black people is the same. And so, those the people who were killed in the Methodist chapel a few years ago, the black people who were killed, or the Jews who were killed in their synagogue in Pittsburgh, right? The origins of the hatred that can lead to things like that, it's the same. The people who were out attacking the Capitol here in America a few weeks ago, they were composed very, very largely of racists on the one hand and anti-Semites on the other, except there's no difference. It's the same. It's the same. The roots are the same.